The city had become a wound, carved open by the warp, bleeding shadows and fire across its broken avenues. Once great monuments to imperial faith now leaned and cracked, their surfaces warped with crawling sigils that glowed faintly in the twilight of a crimson sky. The Ultramarines moved through this husk of civilization in dwindling numbers, their ceramite armor scarred and blackened from the endless fighting. Every step was a labor, every breath a struggle beneath the oppressive pressure of the warp's unseen weight. Around them, the ruins pulsed with whispers, as if the stones themselves remembered the heresies screamed by the cultists that infested every street. Captain Titus stood at the center of his brothers, his blade heavy in his gauntleted hand, his armor streaked with soot and blood. He did not stagger, but he felt the strain of holding the line without pause. Waves of heretics had come, throwing themselves into the Ultramarines' fire, and still more followed with fanatical abandon. For every cultist that fell, two more rose from the alleys and rubble, shrieking praises to their dark gods. Bolters barked, chainswords revved, and still the tide pressed closer. Bodies piling into grotesque barricades that narrowed the city streets. It was not simply a battle. It was a slow suffocation beneath the weight of numbers and madness. The warp bled further into reality as the fighting continued. Smoke from burning shrines rose into the sky, twisting into unnatural shapes before dispersing into the choking atmosphere. Flames did not flicker naturally here. They bent unnaturally toward unseen currents, drawn to the ripples of energy that pulsed from cracks in the air itself. At first, it was only shadows moving where no light should fall. But then, claws tore through reality, followed by the forms of demons writhing into being. Their flesh shifted like molten wax, screaming faces forming and dissolving across their hides as they rushed forward with claws dripping in balefire. The Ultramarines fought them with the same grim determination they had given to the heretics, yet their exhaustion became evident. Bolter magazines emptied, blades grew dull with gore, and armor seals leaked blood and smoke. A battle brother stumbled to his knees, coughing through his vox grill, while another leaned heavily against a shattered column, bolter trembling in his hands. The fatigue was not just physical. It was the pressure of the warp gnawing at their very will, leeching strength as though the city itself fed on their resolve. They fought on, But even Astartes had limits, and those limits were being tested with every passing moment. Above the chaos, a new roar rose, deeper, stronger, commanding. The cultists ceased their shrieking chants long enough to raise their weapons in unison, their voices replaced by a single, unified howl of praise. From the gates of the corrupted cathedral emerged the one they adored, a chaos champion, armored in jagged ceramite blackened with sacrificial blood. His pauldrons bore the marks of the dark gods, warped into barbed protrusions that shimmered with unholy energy. His helm, crowned with spikes, gazed down at the Ultramarines like a predator savoring its prey. With a single gesture, the champion rallied his horde. The cultists surged forward as if the promise of his approval alone could drive them into certain death. The demons howled in unison, their movements sharper and more coordinated now, as though guided by his presence. He carried no weapon forged by mortals. Instead, his blade was a thing of the warp, a serrated monstrosity of metal and flesh fused together, humming with the whispers of bound souls. Each step he took made the air tremble, and even the fire seemed to bow in his direction. The Ultramarines closed ranks, their bodies forming a bulwark, even as their strength faltered. Titus stood firm at the forefront, every motion precise despite the weariness gnawing at his limbs. Around him, his brothers continued to fall, one by one. A warrior staggered forward, firing until his bolter clicked empty, before being dragged screaming beneath the weight of cultist blades. Another collapsed to his knees, crimson pooling beneath his armor, the light in his eyes dimming as he was surrounded. Still, none broke formation willingly. They fought until their last breath, as their gene-coded duty demanded. The champion advanced without haste, savoring the collapse of his enemy's spirit. He raised his blade and pointed it toward Titus, the gesture both a challenge and a promise. The air grew colder, as if the warp itself recognized the coming clash between mortal resilience and corrupt divinity. Around them, the city seemed to breathe. Buildings shuddered, cracks widened in the ground, and the crimson light of the sky deepened into a shade that resembled fresh blood. Titus did not falter. Even as his body ached and his brothers dwindled, he anchored himself as the last defiance against the tide, his silence louder than any war cry. As the press of cultists closed in, the battlefield narrowed into a maelstrom of steel, blood, and unending voices. The chants of the heretics rose louder, blending with the screeches of demons, forming a cacophony that drowned the very memory of silence. Warp echoes rippled through the streets, carrying fragments of words in 1,000 voices at once, whispering blasphemies that gnawed at the edges of sanity. The Ultramarines fought in this storm as though they were submerged in it, their movements slow, their senses dulled, their vision darkened by fatigue. Yet still they fought. Titus stood unbroken at the center of it all, a lone pillar of strength in a sea of corruption. His armor bore the marks of 100 strikes. His breath came heavy through the vox, but he held the line with unyielding determination. All around him, his brothers fell into silence, until their once proud formation resembled a circle of statues eroded by time and violence. The champion raised his blade higher, his horde screaming for slaughter, and the ground beneath them cracked wide, as though the world itself had joined their chorus. The grip of the warp tightened, and the city became a nightmare that consumed all light and hope.